Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredible, totally invisible machinery operating inside everyday plants. Have you ever really looked at a leaf and wondered what's actually going on inside? We kind of just see plants as static background scenery, right? But beneath that quiet green exterior, it's literally a dynamic, nonstop processing plant. So, to kick things off, let's ponder this massive biological mystery. Think about it. You and I, animals, we constantly have to hunt, forage, or chew just to survive. But a plant, it just sits there. How does a living thing with no mouth, literally no heart to pump blood, and zero muscles manage to feed itself, grow to massive heights, and ultimately power the entire globe? Well, let's dive in and see exactly how they solve this massive logistical challenge. Section 1. The ultimate food factory. Okay, so deep inside the plant cells, specifically in these tiny organs called chloroplasts, the plant acts as an autotroph. That's just a fancy way of saying it creates its own food. On the input side, it draws in carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, and light energy straight from the sun. It mixes all these together in its chlorophyll-rich cells. And the output? Glucose, which is the food the plant uses to grow, and oxygen, which, let's face it, is a highly convenient byproduct for the rest of us. We can actually map exactly how this happens. Notice how the sunlight hits the leaf, right? The leaf absorbs that light through its green chlorophyll pigment. At the exact same time, carbon dioxide is sneaking in through these tiny pores called stomata, and water is being pulled all the way up from the roots. It's like the plant is a solar-powered alchemist. It takes these completely simple, non-living ingredients and magically turns them into rich organic food and fresh oxygen. Section 2, proving the invisible process. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, how do we know this microscopic factory is actually working? Well, as scientists, we want solid proof. We know that the glucose produced in leaves is quickly converted into starch for storage, right? So we just test for starch. It's a simple process. First, boil a leaf in hot water to soften it up, then boil it in alcohol using a water bath. This totally strips out that green chlorophyll, leaving the leaf basically colorless. Finally, wash it off and add a few drops of iodine. If there's starch hidden in there, that leaf is going to change color. That boiling step? Absolutely crucial. It strips away the green pigment so we can actually see the chemical reaction. Once those iodine drops hit that bleached leaf, it turns this striking dark blue. You see, iodine is a specific indicator. It only turns dark blue when it hits starch. So boom! Undeniable chemical proof right there that the leaf has been super busy manufacturing food. But wait, what about the oxygen? Well, this next brilliant little experiment gives us undeniable visual evidence that plants are, quite literally, exhaling the air we breathe. We take some aquatic hydrilla plants, submerge them under a funnel, and balance a water-filled test tube right on top. Leave it in the sun, and pretty soon bubbles start rising. Now, to prove those bubbles are pure oxygen, we carefully pull off the tube and insert a glowing wooden splinter. Since oxygen fuels combustion, that mildly glowing splinter bursts right back into a bright flame. No way, right? Looking at the actual physical setup here, you can totally see those oxygen bubbles rising up from the aquatic plant at the bottom. Actually, if you've ever kept a fish tank and noticed those tiny little bubbles floating up from the greenery during the middle of the day, yeah, that isn't just random air. That is pure oxygen being actively manufactured by the plant, keeping your fish alive. Pretty amazing. Section 3, the plant transport network. All right, so the plant has made its food and captured its water. But here's the catch. Without a heart to pump it, or veins like you and I have, how does it move all these supplies around? I mean, how does a giant oak tree get water from deep underground all the way up to its highest leaves? Let's define our first major logistics tool, diffusion. Simply put, this is the process where a substance moves randomly from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Think about peeling an orange. That strong citrus smell quickly spreads across the room from where it's highly concentrated to where it isn't. In plants, this is exactly how carbon dioxide passively enters the leaf and how oxygen slips right on out. You can really see diffusion in action right here, using Condis crystals dropped into a beaker of water. At first, that deep purple color is highly concentrated right at the bottom, but just give it some time, and those particles randomly move until they are perfectly, evenly distributed. Plants rely on this exact same principle of natural physics to shuffle gases in and out of their systems, and they do it without spending a single ounce of energy. Next up, we have osmosis. Now, osmosis is kind of like a highly specialized form of diffusion, but specifically for water molecules passing through a semi-permeable membrane. What's a semi-permeable membrane? Well, think of it like an exclusive bouncer at a club. It happily lets the water in, but totally blocks other dissolved molecules from getting through. This is exactly the trick those tiny root hairs use to pull fresh moisture straight out of the dirt. In this classic thistle funnel experiment, we can literally watch osmosis define gravity. So the funnel is filled with a salty solution, covered tightly with a cellophane membrane, and then dropped into pure water. Because the concentration of water is much higher outside the funnel than inside, the water literally forces its way in through that cellophane just to balance things out. It pushes the liquid level straight up the tube. And this completely brings the macro effect of that microscopic osmosis to life. What we have here is a balsam plant that was uprooted and popped into water dyed with bright red ink. Over just a few short hours, the plant's roots absorbed that red water via osmosis and shipped it all the way up the stem through specialized tissues called the xylem. It's just a spectacular, real-world visual of the plant's internal plumbing hard at work. Section 4. Transpiration, the water cycle. Okay, we've seen how water goes in through the roots, but how does it actually leave the plant? Well, this final stage creates an incredible natural vacuum that honestly drives the entire transport system. And that brings us to transpiration. Transpiration is essentially the plant sweating. It's the evaporation of water through the aerial parts of the plant, mostly through those exact same tiny leaf pores we mentioned earlier, the stomata. As water evaporates from the leaves, it creates a powerful pull, kind of like you sucking on a straw, which actively draws fresh water up from the roots through the stem and right into the leaves. You can actually prove this one yourself, right in your own backyard. Just grab a clear polythene bag and tie it securely around a leafy branch of any potted plant. Leave it alone for an hour or so, and you'll literally watch the invisible water vapor condense into highly visible droplets coating the inside of the bag. The plant is just constantly pumping water into the atmosphere. Section 5. Why plant processes matter. So far, we've really zoomed in on individual leaves and roots. Now, let's zoom way out to the entire globe. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that these silent, completely invisible processes are doing the heavy lifting for our whole planet. Plants literally act as our global thermostat, absorbing carbon dioxide, which directly minimizes the greenhouse effect and fights global warming. On top of that, they are the singular oxygen generators required for every breathing creature on Earth and form the absolute baseline of our entire global food supply. Just look at this vast, icy ecosystem. Every single ecosystem on Earth, no matter how vast, freezing, or completely harsh it is ultimately powered by that initial, microscopic conversion of sunlight into energy. I mean, without that tiny chloroplast factory inside the plant's cells trapping the sun's rays, Earth would just be a barren, lifeless rock floating in space. And every single animal in this massively complex food web relies entirely on that botanical logistics network we just explored. The rabbit eats the grass, the fox eats the rabbit. Even the apex predators, who would never touch a leaf in their lives, are fueled exclusively by the glucose that plants manufactured out of thin air, water, and sunlight. It's all connected. I really hope this explainer has completely changed your perspective today. These processes, photosynthesis, diffusion, osmosis, transpiration, they are happening silently by the billions every single second of the day. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Next time you walk past a tree, or even just look at a simple little leaf outside your window, will you just see passive greenery, or will you recognize the incredible, invisible microscopic engine that is literally keeping our world alive? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep wondering.